Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're here. We are going to dive right into 13 of the most extreme, frankly bizarre, and totally unbelievable stories pulled straight from our sources. We're looking at scenarios that literally push the absolute limits of science, history, and the human mind. So let's just get right into it. To make sense of all this, here's our quick roadmap. First, physics of the impossible. Second, bizarre human ingenuity. Third, unbelievable freak accidents. And finally, the mind and reality. Okay, section 1. Physics of the impossible. This is where the hard rules of science totally ruin our wildest dreams. So have you ever wondered what happens when cartoon-level hypotheticals hit the unbreakable laws of thermodynamics? Imagine this. What if you took a massive, unimaginably giant bucket of water and just dumped it right onto the sun? I mean, your first instinct is probably, well, water puts out fire, right? So would it actually extinguish our star and leave Earth completely frozen in the dark? Well, actually, there's a fundamental difference between a campfire and a star. You see, a normal fire goes out when you add water because the water cools the fuel and cuts off the oxygen. But the sun isn't a normal fire. It doesn't run on oxidation at all. It runs on fusion. It's basically smashing hydrogen nuclei together at mind-boggling speeds. So if you flooded the sun with water, you're literally just giving it more hydrogen fuel. And it gets worse. That massive amount of water adds huge mass to the sun, which ramps up its gravity. That stronger gravity would actually pull the Earth in closer, and eventually, well, cook all of us. Let's look at another wild physics puzzle. What if you dropped a steak from space? Could air resistance perfectly sear a fillet on the way down? Okay, step 1. Dropping it from world record skydiving heights. Well, that just freezes it. The tiny bit of heat from the fall is absolutely no match for those icy high-altitude winds. All right, step 2. Let's bump it up to 155 miles. Here, the outside sears nicely, but the intense cold stops the inside from warming up at all. So you get a steak that's charred on the outside and totally raw in the middle. Now, step 3. True extreme altitude. At this height, the air in front of the steak gets squashed so hard, it heats up to thousands of degrees. It completely burns the outside layer, flaking it away in the wind, which exposes the next layer, which then burns and flakes away too. It basically peels it like an onion until you're left with nothing but a flying plate of pure char. 16. That is the number of feet wide your balloon would need to be if you ever tried to survive a skydive using only a helium tank and an uninflated balloon. A standard tank isn't going to cut it, so you need a massive tank and a 16-foot balloon. But here's the physical catch. Inflating a balloon that size takes way too long, and the massive weight of that helium tank makes you fall exponentially faster. You would literally need thousands of miles of fall time just to inflate the thing and slow yourself down. That is far beyond the limit of any plane. Plus, starting that high up, you just suffocate in space before the drop even really began. Okay, imagine swapping the metal balls of a Newton's cradle with human bodies. Sounds crazy, right? Normally, those stiff metal balls squash briefly and spring right back, perfectly transferring that energy to the very last ball. But human bodies were soft and squishy. If you swung the first person into the others, the energy wouldn't transfer cleanly at all. The humans in the middle would just crumple and absorb the impact. Even if you strapped everyone in solid metal armor and swung with immense force, they'd still get brutally bruised, bows would break, and bodies would fling off in totally unpredictable directions. Physics simply does not favor the squishy. Moving right along to section 2, bizarre human ingenuity. Let's talk about some absurd lengths of human creativity. The sheer ambition of the legendary 20-bird roast is honestly mind-boggling. Get this, you start with a single caper. You put that caper inside an anchovy, which goes inside an olive, which is then stuffed into a tiny wild bird. And you just keep stuffing birds into slightly bigger birds until you hit a quail. By the time you're 5 birds deep, the whole thing is still only the size of your hand. Then you just keep going. You fill the gaps with stuffing, cramming a duck into a chicken, then a pheasant, a goose, and a turkey. Finally, you shove the whole shebang inside a giant bustard and cook it for 24 straight hours. Slicing it open reveals exactly 20 layers. It's truly bizarre ingenuity, though totally impossible to recreate today since a bunch of these birds are now actually illegal to eat. Now, human ingenuity isn't just for absurd cooking experiments. Sometimes it is literally about survival. Back in World War I, popping your head out of a trench meant almost instant death. So soldiers invented the periscope rifle. They mounted 2 mirrors to bounce the enemy's image down into the trench. Then they added a frame for an extra stock and a cable to actually pull the trigger. And later on, this evolved brilliantly. They swapped the mirrors for cameras with the back screen, added a hinge to flip the pistol in either direction, and replaced that cable with a secondary grip trigger. It allowed them to neutralize threats while staying staying completely hidden and safe. But sometimes ingenuity comes with profound tragedy. Take the story of the boy born with an incredibly rare disease where a single germ could kill him. Literally seconds after birth, he was placed inside a sterilized plastic chamber. He lived his life in this bubble for years, never once feeling a direct human touch. When he was 12, doctors attempted a miraculous cure using a bone marrow transplant from his sister. And it worked enough that it allowed him to finally touch his family. But tragically, that marrow harbored an undetected virus, and he passed away just weeks later. Yet, his incredible, heartbreaking story helped doctors spot that illness much earlier in others, which ultimately saved hundreds of lives down the road. All right, on to Section 3, Unbelievable Freak Accidents. This is where the totally unpredictable disasters happen. Picture this. It's 1902. A 19-year-old kid is sitting in the stands, keeping score of a baseball game. At 0 seconds, he realizes his pencil is too dull. 15 seconds in, he asks the guy next to him, Leroy, to borrow a small pocket knife to sharpen it. 20 seconds. Leroy opens the knife and hands it over. And in that exact split-second moment, the batter hits a foul ball. It flies right into the stands, strikes the knife while it's midair between the two men, and drives the blade straight between the middleman's ribs right into his heart. Within just a few minutes, a completely harmless request for a pencil sharpener resulted in a 19-year-old tragically bleeding to death right on the spot. I mean, what are the odds? It just goes to show how quickly an ordinary moment, or even a celebration, can turn lethal due to one single bad decision. Here's another split-second timeline for you. A family wanted this highly impressive, over-the-top gender reveal, so they packed a metal tube with colored powder and extra gunpowder. 10 seconds in, the fuse is lit. 12 seconds. That extra gunpowder causes a blast so incredibly forceful that it completely shatters the metal casing. 15 seconds, deadly shrapnel goes flying through the air. Everyone dives for cover, but a piece of metal strikes the grandmother in the head. By the time the smoke cleared, the only color left was red. She passed away without ever even knowing the gender of her grandchild. 14. Now, amidst total devastation, absolute miracles do happen. During the September 11th attacks, 1 hour and 42 minutes after the tower was hit, it began to collapse. Deep inside, rescuers were actually carrying a woman down stairwell B. As the floors above crashed down, obliterating literally everything in their path, the collapse didn't fall perfectly straight down. The floor shifted unevenly, tilting the weight outward. A massive gust of wind blew through as the entire outer structure was stripped away. Everything around them was completely pulverized. But because of that one uneven shift, a tiny pocket of space was preserved. Exactly 14 people inside Stairwell B survived the completely impossible. And that brings us to Section 4, the mind and reality. Let's dive into some truly mind-bending psychological phenomena. Okay, imagine waking up inside a glass coffin that's plunged somewhere at the bottom of the ocean. You've got a hammer in your hand, but you have absolutely no idea how deep you are or how much oxygen you have left. Here is the terrifying dilemma you're facing. If you're super deep down and the coffin is pressurized, swinging that hammer is going to shatter the glass and the ocean's immense weight will crush you instantly. But if you're actually just in shallow water, swinging the hammer lets you escape, float right to the top, and survive. The panic sets in. The cold sweat feels incredibly real. You raise the hammer. What do? Well, that ocean coffin is a thought experiment about dealing with immense pressure. But how do we actually handle the pressure of our own reality? Consider 3 objects facing the exact same adversity, boiling water. The potato goes in hard, but comes out soft and limp, right? It breaks down. The fragile egg goes in delicate, but the boiling water hardens it on the inside. It toughens up. But the coffee beans are entirely different. They don't just react to the water, they change the water itself, transforming it into something rich and entirely new. They completely transform their environment. But what happens when your mind protects you from sudden adversity by completely inventing a new reality? Consider the genuinely chilling story of a man who was violently knocked unconscious by a football player. He recovered, moved on, met a wonderful wife, had 2 beautiful kids, and landed his absolute dream job. 10 perfect years went by. Then, one night, sitting in his living room, he noticed a lamp. The perspective of the lamp was just off. It was distorted. He became totally mesmerized, staring at it for days, refusing to eat or even sleep. His wife begged him to stop, eventually taking the kids and leaving. And then came the devastating realization. To quote the source, the lamp wasn't real. His house, his wife, and children, none of it was real. Suddenly, everything collapsed inward. The man woke up on his sidewalk. He was exactly 10 years younger. He had literally just been knocked down by that football player. An entire decade of profound love, family, and career was nothing but a momentary, intricate hallucination his traumatized brain created in just a split second of unconsciousness. We've looked at the extremes of physics, history, and freak accidents today. But honestly, the most extreme environment of all is our own mind. As you navigate the pressures of life, when the heat rises, are you the potato that breaks down? Are you the egg that hardens your heart? Are you the coffee bean that transforms your surroundings? Or is there a chance that right now, you're just staring at a distorted lamp? Thank you so much for exploring these incredible sources with me today in this explainer. Stay curious, keep learning, and I'll see you in the next one.